everyone, you're joining us here on a brand new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta, and on the show today we'll be speaking to Puneet Goenka. He's the MD and CEO of Zee Entertainment Enterprises, and he's going to be speaking to us about how the latest TRAI Tariff Order is going to impact the consumer, the marketer and the broadcaster. Anant Rangaswami is here with me today. Hey Anant.
Hello.
Anant, so from what I understand, the latest TRAI order sort of enables the consumers to pay for only what they want to watch.
Correct.
So what's the rationale behind this, and how do you think this is going to change the game for the marketer and also the television ecosystem?
See, up to now, historically, we've been first with the cable operator, then with the MSO and so on. You've been forced to take all the channels that a cable operator wants to give you. And he has shared that money in whatever form and manner he felt he needed to or wanted to. It's like, just imagine a situation where you have to pay X rupees a month and you receive all the newspapers, whether you want them or not. And you're paying for the newspapers you don't want, and therefore you're sort of paying more than you should be paying per month.
Right.
So what this tariff order says is, you pay for what you want and don't pay for those you don't want. So it sort of puts pressure on the channels as well, because there were certain channels, say, which I didn't want. I received them and they could claim they reached my house. Now with this tariff order, if I don't want them, I will not pay for those channels. I will not receive those channels, and those channels can no longer claim that it is reaching me. So it has far-reaching consequences, because now content will rule. If the content does not appeal to a consumer, he or she will not buy that channel. Simple as that.
Right. So part of your conversation with Puneet Goenka was also about the growing OTT space. So how do you see that developing?
See, that's interesting. I think, as any CEO of a broadcast company has said before, they are in the business of content, not necessarily in the business of broadcast.
Right.
So you look at all the big broadcasters, they've also got into the OTT space. Very few are non-broadcasters in the OTT space. For example, say Applause, which will come from Aditya Birla Group. But it just means that, say, those with internet connectivity and willing to experiment have more choices. They can go beyond just television channels and look at content which is available on the OTT space. What it will do really is to make all content for some stratas of society compete with a lot more content. Say those who get only cable TV channels will sort of compete with TV channels. But those who have access, like most urban Indians with TV channels and OTT platforms, the content will compete. So OTT content will compete with broadcast content. I mean, that's the crux of it. Also, let's remember, we must mention that WION is part of Zee Media Corporation, and Punit is associated with ZMCL. And Melt is very much a program on WION, so we need to make it clear that the subject we're talking to is involved in the business we are in as well.
Great. So let's find out from Puneet Goenka what he has to say. Let's get ready to melt with Puneet Goenka.
Puneet, good to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, Anant.
So, as always, it's only when there's confusion that I want to talk to you. So, now there's confusion on the TRAI tariff order. You know, on my way here, I read something about somebody trying to demystify the TRAI tariff order for consumers. Well, that itself tells you how difficult it is. Why should you have to demystify anything?
Oh, please send them to me.
Yeah. So why should you? So what do you think is going to happen with the TRAI tariff order? I've got a connection, a DTH connection, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Now, I paid a few thousand rupees a few months ago. Is it still valid? Is it not valid? How do I reallocate the money? I have no idea.
Right.
And imagine if that is the case for me, I'm a consumer. It's the case for millions of consumers.
Sure.
And therefore, there's impact on advertisers.
Sure.
So tell me, A, what do you make of this order, and how do you demystify this order?
So I think first and foremost, let's talk about consumer, because that's the crux of our existence, right?
Right.
What this tariff order does for the consumer is actually gives the power to the consumer to now choose what they want to consume on television.
Right.
The earlier regime was where you had the cable companies or the DTH companies who would create a package for you and just offer it to you whether you liked it or not, and you paid a fee for it.
Right.
Now you can actually select the kind of content you want, even if you want it by a la carte pricing. It's easier said than done, because
that is
the infrastructure doesn't exist today in most of the cable companies to handle this kind of a unique nature of business. There potentially could be 180 million unique packages out there.
Absolutely.
So what the DPOs are doing, and what I'm trying to see, what I've understood from the DPOs is that they are creating multiple options for the consumer to choose from. Earlier it was one option, there was not multiple options given. DTH of course gave you a few options. But now you will have emergence of even more options that the consumers can choose from. Rather than just getting a bouquet of 250 or 300 channels, you can select the 30, 40 that the DPO will handpick and give you options on.
Right. So not quite extreme a la carte. So not the millions of possible solutions, but maybe hundreds.
Yes, so the DPO is trying to create those hundreds of solutions.
Right.
Theoretically, as per the tariff order, they can still be millions.
Right.
Because you as the consumer can say, I don't want these 100 options, I want to actually go and create my own bouquet going forward from here. What's that is going to do is it's going to sharpen the delivery of the content to the consumers, which means the question of accidental viewership goes away completely.
Right.
And coming from the advertiser's perspective, now, today we have so much inventory that truly you don't know what you're buying.
We have so much inventory. You're meaning all these 800 channels put together.
Correct.
Not
Zee. I'm talking about the industry as overall. There is so much inventory in the market that the amount of wastage that the advertiser sees in terms of the campaign that they run is huge. Whereas in this scenario, you would know that the consumer has chosen this content of this channel that they're going to consume, and therefore the wastage should reduce by automatic measure of that.
So what you're saying then is now the larger, perhaps more established channels will benefit from the TRAI tariff order, but the niche or low interest channels will kind of suffer. Am I reading that right?
Yes, because that's going to be out of the consumer's choice.
Right.
So if you're not relevant to the consumer, your existence is of no relevance to the market.
So then do you think that the case, again, we're going back almost 20 years, for a CPT and CPM kind of debate? Because now if there's a channel which gets a loyal 50,000 viewers a day, they're going to be absolutely in trouble with the TRAI tariff order.
Right.
But they've got 50,000 loyal viewers who perhaps have a value greater than, just another viewer on a GEC. So how do you see that play out?
No, absolutely. I mean, that debate remains relevant. It becomes even more relevant now because now it's far more focused, and it's got people with intent who are consuming that content rather than just by virtue of being available.
Right. Now, we've seen whether in the case of the migration to DAS, when we've had an order like this, it comes with a lot of pain, a lot of ifs and buts, whether it will happen, not happen. Today, I'm not clear still whether it's going to happen.
See, Anant, any change will be a big one.
Right.
We are talking about changing the habits that have been built over the last 2.6 decades. Right. 26 years of pay TV has existed in this country. So it's not going to be easy. I mean, the consumer, as we know it, even as you talked about the DAS implementation, until the day the signal didn't go off, they didn't choose. Right. Even today, as we talk about, the number is probably high single digits who have chosen a new bouquet as per the tariff order. That by the time we reach 31st of January may run up to maybe 14-15% or 20% at best.
At best.
At best.
Right.
So the actual choice of consumers will only be done on 1st of February when the pay TV signals will be switched off.
Right. Now, this brings me to the next problem, which is if they get switched off and if consumers don't figure out how to move, you're going to have, shall we say, a lot of blank channels on television screens.
Possibly,
and
yes.
Therefore, there's an impact on advertisers and an impact on broadcasters as well.
No, definitely it will impact. There will be disruption that will happen. And that's where we have requested at the BARC board level itself that we should look at a temporary suspension of the ratings.
Right.
Because that chaos that will happen will force the industry, because it's not the consumer, that there is no way that on 1st of January the 170 million homes will suddenly wake up and it will happen, because the DPOs can't handle that kind of a load. They need time to implement that over a period of a certain amount of this thing. So from that there will be disruption, there will be blank screens, there will be advertisers who may say that this is not the right time to advertise on television and look for other mediums.
Right. So that's a fear that advertisers have, that it's going to be, there is a blackout or I mean not a voluntary blackout, but a de facto blackout. So they where do they find the audiences in this February 1st to maybe February end time?
Well, I think they have to go with the assumption of the fact that while legally we have to switch off the signals as of 1st of February, but there is still content out there available, right? There will be free-to-air markets which are still operating. Content owners like ourselves, we run free-to-air services, and that's where you'll find the audiences. Hopefully the disruption will not last for too long and things should come onto track within, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay. Now, what is the role of the DTH operator or the DPO in this? Because one of the questions or discussion points at a conference I attended recently was nobody in the audience of about 500 people had received one single call from their DTH operator or cable operator to say, hey, you got to do this, the cut-off date. Not one. Don't you think they have a role or a responsibility to say, hey, this is going to happen, choose your pack, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely, they have the responsibility, and I think some of them, if not all of them, are already marketing it on their own properties, right? Whether they have the landing pages, etc. I think a lot of the DPOs have already started putting out those bundles and packages out there. It's still not as educated to the consumer because consumer is still confused. The broadcasters advertising their own price points, DPOs are advertising their own bouquets and bundles. So there is confusion and we have to give time for the consumer to.
Okay, now I'll close on this topic. Tell me, what is your sense? By March 31st, will we have a settled regime as far as this tariff order is concerned?
I think so. It will have to happen by March 31st. If not, the tariff order would not have been able to achieve what it set out to achieve. You can imagine consumers' upheaval if their favorite shows are not being made available to them on a daily basis. I mean, in India, we have television is the single largest source of entertainment for any consumer today. That will not be able to sustain beyond a max of 4 to 8 weeks.
You said television is the favorite source of entertainment for consumers. So move on, you've got television, and then you've got stuff which is on your handheld phones,
OTT.
The OTT platform. You've taken a big punt, so have almost every single broadcaster taken a big punt. And there is complete lack of clarity on the size, scope of the OTT platform. And they say, oh God, if OTT succeeds, television will die. Then what happens? So how do you react to that? You know, the simplistic view that OTT is growing so fast because if you look at word of mouth, it looks like it's growing frenetically. But you look at time spent, you look at shows watched, they're all very small numbers. So how do you react to OTT versus broadcast television?
I think these fears are for lack of proper understanding of the business. I think OTT is the flavor of the season right now, but it's by no virtue a disruption. Right? Television still is the largest source of entertainment for the consumers. If you look at the time spent consumed on television, it's an average of 200 minutes plus. Whereas on OTT at best is 31 minutes, which includes your social media, right? Interaction.
This is per week, you're talking about both numbers.
Yes, correct. So from that perspective, it's far from even looking at reaching that kind of audiences. My view is that television will remain the reach medium for the longest period. I mean, I can't even foresee. I mean, let's step back 10 years ago. People talked about that print will die, but print seems to be still growing. I mean, you know, it's been a decade since then, since the first death of print was heard about.
More than that.
More than that, probably. Yeah. So from that perspective, I think both will coexist. The inflection point is anybody's guess. It's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. My view is that it's nobody can guess what it's going to be. But the crux of it is going to be, firstly, when is that inflection point to happen where the reach of OTT starts to match the reach of television? And then how the monetization of that takes place on the OTT platform.
The next question, so how does monetization? You look at print and let's say print number of copies of newspapers is growing by and large, I mean helped by the vernacular, but the number of readers on .com or apps and so on has grown exponentially. But they're not able to transfer the revenue from print onto, I mean from the physical paper onto the digital platform. So how will that sort of pan out on TV?
No, if you look at today on the television side, it's already very skewed in favor of OTT.
Right.
If you look at CPT is what OTT transacts on currency.
Right.
Unlike television, which is on CPRP.
Right.
So if you take the best show of Zee TV today, and I convert that to a CPT number,
Right.
My OTT show, the same show on OTT platform is 10x.
Give you more money. Right.
It's
Absolutely.
10x.
Right.
So from that perspective, it's only going to be win-win if that's going to happen.
Right.
But
Now-
that's still far away.
Sure. But now you've been continuing to pump money into Z5, and now we've just had a conversation saying that it's a long haul for Z5. So why do you continue to punt on it so heavily, and what is your end game there?
No, that's where we look at the business from the perspective of today and the future.
Right.
Right. I punted about 10 years back on the regional market.
Right.
And we've seen what has happened with the regional market, right? I mean, the entire growth of Zee in the last 6 years that we've seen is largely on the back of regional. Similarly, when we launched the OTT platform, we were very conscious of the fact that it's not a Hindi or an English language platform.
Right.
It has to be for the Bharat, the so-called Bharat of this country, is not about Hindi or English. It's going to be about the content or entertainment in their own languages. We did another innovation. We were the first and only people who offer regional packs for subscription on OTT,
Right.
unlike anybody else. So it's about building that market going forward. You see, today television is predominantly for families, right? That's where because 94% single TV households, 3 generations of the family living together, it's a family community watching that happens on television. Whereas the OTT platforms are consumed more on their personal devices. So that's a differentiated content that we offer on the OTT platform vis-a-vis what we offer on TV. So it's a television plus an OTT experience from the consumer point of view.
Right. So one of the challenges with this, as you grow on OTT, is going to be a sort of yardstick for measuring total eyeballs. Whether on television, now you measure television in one way through BARC, OTT somebody else measures. It's going to be a mess for the marketer. Now, how is the marketer going to navigate this, or is he going to have 2 dashboards, 2 sets of media plans coming up? Where does this end?
My view is that they both have to integrate at one source.
So whose responsibility is it to integrate it?
It's the industry's responsibility.
So
We
when you
have
say-
to work together to
Okay.
see that happens.
Right.
Today, the difference of opinion that comes in from a marketeer's perspective is he wants to see the performance of his advertising.
Right.
From our perspective, we want to see the performance of the content,
Right.
which is why the advertising takes place,
Right.
right? And until we don't marry the two, like we did in BARC, there is no win-win situation.
But there's a big difference here. You've got a CPM operating in one world and CPT operating in the other world, as you just described. So if you marry the two, where does it end up? Does it sit on a CPM measurement or a CPT measurement?
See, negotiations between content owners or media owners and the advertisers are bilateral discussions. I don't think we should, as an industry, try and say, now that you merge the two currencies or two viewerships, the trading currency suddenly changes.
Right.
That's a function of bilateral negotiations. It's not something that we should try and, as an industry, try and solve for. If tomorrow, as Zee, we believe that we want to trade only on CPT, right? It's the advertiser's choice whether he agrees with me or not.
Right.
If they choose not to agree, they are free to go and advertise elsewhere, right? It's going to be a more bilateral thing. From a content owner's perspective, we would always want our content to be measured and not just the advertising.
Right. Television and OTT is a small part of the whole world of what the marketer has to grapple with. How do you see the marketer's world in 2019? How is it going to become easier, tougher, and what are you doing to help him or her?
I think the marketer's job is going to get, simplified going forward, given that, more technologies now will help them choose how they want to, reach their messaging across.
Including the TRAI Tariff Order?
Including the TRAI Tariff
Right.
Order. And in fact, the other big thing that happens with the TRAI Tariff Order is that I'm expecting a lot of regional advertisers to suddenly become far more relevant for television.
Right.
Because it's now focused. The wastage that we used to talk about is gone away, right? And therefore, that segment will emerge in a big way for broadcasters.
Is there a case then for BARC once again to increase its panel size? Now, the more granular you get, the more...
Well, BARC will certainly have to redo the entire panel once this thing settles.
Right.
Based on how the dispersion or selection of content is happening across the country. Currently, the panel is based on a certain metric that they have.
Right.
And with this new tariff order, that metric will change and they'll have to redo the entire panel, which will help the advertisers even further focus and sharpen their advertising.
Now, one of the things the word you've used 3 times today is not a word one hears commonly, which is wastage. Yeah? Now, for the marketer, just explain why the TRAI tariff order and growth of OTT will help him reduce his wastage.
See, because now it is a function of intent by the consumer that chooses that content.
Right.
Unlike the old world, which I again said, and I'll repeat that earlier it was not my choice of content that I was asking for. I was offered 250 channels, out of which I consumed what I liked. Today I have
you watch some stuff accidentally.
Yeah, and you watch some stuff accidentally,
Right.
which got registered as viewership. In the new scenario, you know that the consumer is consuming this because of intent to consume, because he's himself selected that content, and therefore it's a much more loyal audience base that you have, unlike the loyal medium viewers and the flirters. So that's where I believe that this will help the industry.
Right. So now you think overall, because of the use of technology, you will have a marketer, shall we say, having a relatively not so difficult time. I'm not saying the word easy. How easy is it going to be for your ad sales team the coming 1 year? When I say yours, I don't mean Zee, I mean broadcast television.
I think there also we'll have to relook at the entire ecosystem again as to how the penetration of our content is happening, right? Gone are the days where you paid a carriage fee and you got the right to be carried and reach the homes of the consumers. So that's going to change entirely. And therefore, the pricing, which is now a general pricing for all the audiences that I aggregate today, the focused advertising or the focused audiences that I gather in the future, the pricing will have to be differentiated for that.
Now you've had your results a few days ago, and you've committed that you will maintain this growth. Does that take into account delay in tariff order, for example?
You see, I mean,
No.
when I talk about guidance for growth, I don't mean disruptions in one quarter here and there.
Right.
Right. I think the company is broad-based enough to take any such short-term blows that may happen to it, and we have enough growth in the base of the business for us to ride this out.
Okay, wonderful. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Hope to see you immediately after whatever cutoff date there is for the
Right.
tariff order and the establishment of the tariff order.
Absolutely.
And that was the conversation. He is presenting the MEL cheat sheet. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Melt. You can also watch all our content on our social media platforms. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye.